Good morning. I get the privilege of introducing the speaker for this morning's session, but I have to tell you, he's a relatively inexperienced speaker. This whole speaking in front of groups thing is kind of new to him. So really, you shouldn't expect to get a lot from this session. Does anyone believe me? And that is why I will never succeed in the Tall Tales contest. Seriously, it is my privilege to introduce David Henderson. There are some things I want to tell you about background, but also some personal comments I want to make. David is a graduate of the University of Texas School of Law. He is a lawyer, but he's one of the good ones. He has had some time in private practice. He has done some prosecuting work. In his time in private practice, he has done a lot of pro bono work. He has trained prosecutors and police officers on how to win cases. And when he joined the DA's office in San Antonio, I don't know if he ever anticipated that his work would be as important as it was. And I want to get this right, the numbers. He has tried over 70 cases ranging from human trafficking to intoxication manslaughter to capital murder. In other words, he's done some extremely important work in a very significant way, and so I should be lauded for that. And it's okay if you applaud that. In 2010, I was in the audience in Palm Desert, California for the World Championship of Public Speaking. Now, since I won the World Championship in 2003, I've been to almost every single World Championship finals since then. And very frequently, there is a point during the eventual champion speech when it hits me and I say, you know what, that person just won the contest. What happened, what I experienced during David's speech was different. It did not happen before, and it hasn't happened since. There was a moment during his speech when I could literally and hear my heartbeat. Because he had forged such a strong on his stories and his message, compelling, and it impacted me in a way that I had not been during a contest. Simply put, David is an exemplary and an excellent speaker. After the contest, I had a chance to spend a little bit of time with David and his now wife, Josephine. And by the way, David, you married up. Okay?
Very true.
And for those of us who have married up, it's important that we know that. But I had a chance to spend time with them, and they are just phenomenal people. Beyond the fact that he's a great speaker, he and his wife are really, really great people. So I'm delighted to have this privilege to introduce him. His presentation is entitled Moment 50. Please give a warm welcome to the 2002 World Champion of Public Speaking, David Henderson.
I'm going to remind Jim of something he told me right after I won in 2010. He said, for the rest of your life, whenever you speak, there will be no place for you to go but down. And after that introduction, I think that is absolutely true. Jim was one of the first people that I met after I won the World Championship. He was the first mentor I had as a world champion. I won the championship, looking forward to what I was about to do. And the weird thing about the World Championship is, before you win, nobody's interested in anything you have to say. The day after you win, you're supposed to suddenly be an expert, right? And I remember Jim was talking about developing a product, and I was like, I don't know what to say because I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to be teaching people, simply because the way this happened for me was completely unexpected. When Jim said that I didn't have any idea how important the work I was going to end up doing became, he's absolutely right. I went to law school, and like most people who go to law school who don't come from a family of people who are lawyers and doctors, I took the biggest paycheck somebody waved at me coming out of law school. And I thought all lawyers are out there fighting the good fight, right? Not at all. And so I go to work at this big fancy law firm. We never, ever go to court. And so I realized I need to get some place where I can get some trial experience to actually figure out what I'm doing. And once I started doing that, I realized, you know what? You really can't be a good trial lawyer if you don't know how to talk to people. And you may think that has anyone here ever had to deal with a lawyer before? You've had to go to court for something? Okay, did they speak as well as you thought lawyers could speak? Not at all. We're horrible communicators. And so I realized, I've got to practice at this, actually figure out how to do it. And that's where my speaking skills developed. And the things that ended up helping me, it has still taken me a while to fully accept work. And I'm going to start off by telling you about a speech I was asked to give recently for a nonprofit called the Friends of the Dallas Public Library. Are any of you familiar with that organization by chance, before I start talking any further? You are? Were you there at the annual fundraiser by chance? Okay, so I get this invitation to speak at the Friends of the Dallas Public Library annual fundraiser. One of the people that's going to be there is a Pulitzer Prize winner from Austin, Texas. Right? But it's also a little nerve-wracking, because they tell me what we want you to do is talk about why libraries matter. And I'm thinking, yeah. I love books. I love libraries. But 10 minutes on why libraries matter, not sure how I'm going to make that interesting. And so what do you think I did? It's the same thing you're always supposed to do. When you can't figure out where to start with a topic, going to the library would have been a very intelligent way to approach that. Thank you, Jim Key. That is not what I did. I sat down, I tried to think through what are personal stories I have of experiences at the public library. And I remembered my experience with the public library started at the Johnston Public Library in San Antonio, Texas, which is right on the backside of Lackland Air Force Base, where my dad worked and where my mom spent 3/4 of her days either picking him up, dropping him off, taking us to the commissary, BX, and she also worked as a nurse for a little while. And so when we had to do a book report for school, I was allowed to go pick out my book from the Johnston Public Library. First one I did on the Tuskegee Airmen, then I did one on Muhammad Ali, then the Tuskegee Airmen, then Muhammad Ali. I threw in Jesse Owens to kind of mix things up, then I went back to Muhammad Ali, and then my dad said, you and I are going to go to the library together, and we're going to pick out a book. And I thought, yes! Like, Dad went to the Air Force right after high school. He's been a career master sergeant. He was in Birmingham. Awesome, right? We get to the library. We walk right past the sports section. I'm thinking, okay, no Muhammad Ali. Tuskegee Airmen it is. Past the history section. We walked past all the nonfiction books altogether. And what you have to remember is this was back in the 80s. Punishment was still very much in vogue. So I'm thinking I must have done something I've forgotten about, because when you normally start getting to the back of the store or the building, that was what was coming back in the 80s. You get all the way to the back in the literature section, almost to the very end, and my dad hands this book, asking, why are we reading a book with a misspelled title? He says, what are you talking about? I said, this book should say The Hobby. It says The Hobbit. And he said, no, that's right. And I asked a question that I was asking for many, many years. What's a hobbit? My dad looks at me and he says, it's a dangerous business, Frodo, stepping out your door. If you don't keep your feet, there's no telling where you might be swept off to. And I looked at him, I said, I can relate, because you just swept me off to a very uncomfortable place. Please don't do that voice again. It's a public library. So we start reading The Hobbit, and I hated The Hobbit. I feel bad. I know it's a classic. I know it's a classic. In all fairness to Tolkien, I think it's really hard to take a kid from writing book reports about Muhammad Ali to the fantasy genre in one fell swoop. I did what any kid would do under the circumstances. I asked, is there a movie? And there was. And some of you are thinking, oh, what's the problem? Because you're thinking of the modern versions of the Lord of the Rings movie. And you're shaking your head, which makes me know that you know the movie I'm talking about. There's a 1977 animated version of The Hobbit. And it's a musical. It's as bad as you think if you haven't seen it. Don't. I was forced to watch that movie multiple times. started off telling the friends of the Dallas Public Library, there's more to discover in a library than books, and not all of it's good. And I blame you for a significant amount of my childhood trauma visited upon me by my eccentric father. In fact, if my mom was here, she'd say that we didn't have enough money growing up to be called eccentric. When you're broke, you're just crazy. And that's what it was. But that's where I want to start my talk to you in terms of magic moments. There's an experiment that I read about in a book called Made to Stick. If you haven't looked at that book, you should. It's by the Heath brothers. They've written a few really good books, one of which is actually called, I think, Magic Moments. I titled this speech before they came out with that book, so I didn't copy it. But I give this exercise that this professor at Stanford did. Smart people go to Stanford, right? Students show up for this communication class the first day. And he says, I want all of you to break into small groups, and each of you is going to give a 2-minute speech. So they're thinking, competition, right? Awesome. They start giving their speeches. And then they're expecting to vote on who won. But the professor doesn't have them vote. He has them put their desks back together, and the class continues. You're like, well, that's weird. 2 weeks later, he says, break into your small groups again. They're like, yes, now we get to find out who won, right? Instead, he says, take out a piece of paper, write down what you can remember about each of the speeches you heard 2 weeks ago. Have you ever tried that with one of the speeches you've given in Toastmasters? It'll be a humbling experience, I promise you. What people actually remember about what you said. When we talk about magic moments, that's what we're talking about. How do you manage to do something memorable when you're talking to people? Step one, I would argue, is always, always, always tell a story. I hate to break it to you. People don't like hearing speeches. In Toastmasters, we become accustomed to speechcraft. We respect really good speakers. In the regular world, people don't like hearing speeches. I'm a lawyer. When I stand up in court to give a speech, no one says, yes, I get to listen to this guy talk for half an hour. Awesome. If you tried to bring your kids here with you this morning, none of them are going to say, oh yes, I would so much rather go hear David Henderson or whomever speak than play PlayStation or go hang out with my friends or actually just sit here and read a book. You want to get your kids to read more? Tell them they're going to have to listen to speeches. No one likes listening. However, people will always listen to stories because you've been trained to do it since the time that you were a child. And they like hearing stories because stories are entertaining. And I think that the modern stories that have the best speeches are actually in the movies. If you ever listen to the speeches you really like from the movies and you time them, they are incredibly brief. Like your favorite movie speeches, if you go back and you time them, they're about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That's what people are used to. You always hear this argument that, oh, well, attention spans have diminished. I don't think that's true. I think people finally realize that no one is listening when I'm up here talking because it's kind of boring. Telling stories to bridge that gap. I like this movie. Has anybody seen Ratatouille? Right. If you haven't seen Ratatouille, you should watch it just for the scene I'm about to describe for you. Good, I'm seeing hands. Ratatouille's an awesome film. This rat decides he wants to be a chef. Weird premise, I know. Bear with me. He gets the help of another young chef to help him. Actually, the young chef doesn't help him. The rat literally stands on his head in the movie, goes on his hair, and he teaches him how to cook. And the chef pretends that the young chef, you see on the right, I guess yes, you're right, is pretending like he's doing all the cooking. The rat is the genius behind it. So this food critic starts to hear about the restaurant. Says, you know what, I'm going to go check this place out. And they know the food critic is coming. And so the rat says, you know what we need to do? We need to make ratatouille. That is not, I said, on purpose. Not highbrow food. Feed food critics ratatouille. The rat's like, trust me, it's the thing to do. Critics, this is the look on his face when he tastes the ratatouille. And this is the look you're going for when you give presentations to people. Because what happens is, he forgets that he's supposed to be evaluating the food. And the dish that he was served transports him back to a time when he was a little boy eating that food at his table. When you speak to people, that's the first thing you have to do. The better you get at speaking, the more critical it is to do this. You have to remove people from thinking that they're hearing a speaker who's going to say something that they're going to disagree with, or they're going to want to argue with, post their opposition to you on Facebook or YouTube, and you've got to get them to a comfortable place that they weren't expecting, where they can actually receive what it is that you're saying. That's why I'm telling you that you should always start with a personal story. Let me ask you, have any of you, I know this is weird, I know you're wondering where the Oscar Mayer Wiener van is coming into this, the Wienermobile is what I think it's called. Have any of you heard before that you should always focus on telling stories when you stand up to speak? That's not new, is it? Everybody hears that in your Toastmasters meeting. But what I find is that when I talk to people about the importance of sharing personal stories, they don't really get why you're supposed to tell them. Does anybody have an idea about why you should use personal stories when you're speaking? Come on, somebody's got to blurt one out. I'm going to start calling on people. It's going to be really unfair to Jim Peaks. I know his name. Yes, ma'am. You do get more engaged when you're telling a personal story. Any other ideas? Yes, sir. You speak from the heart and you connect. Absolutely right. Yes, ma'am. Everyone said so. Point. The most, because it took me a long time to realize that. So can everyone hear what was said? Sharing personal stories helps you open up to other people. It makes you more engaged with what you're saying. If you tell a personal story the right way, it also makes the audience start thinking their own. It's hard to explain the importance of authenticity when someone is speaking. And forgive me, when I talk, I use my experiences. I don't mean to tell you that they should be your same experiences. But the experiences I have of great speakers happen in church more than any place else. It just so happens my wife and I have gone to some churches with some really good pastors. I'm not making this a speech about religion. I'm just making this a speech about where I've heard great speeches, okay? There's a pastor named Max Lucado in San Antonio, Texas. He's a brilliant storyteller. We have gone to church at Potter's house. Brilliant story. Sometimes when I find myself doing, I compare them. I don't necessarily think of as professional speakers, the people who are supposed to be professional speakers, politicians. Whether you're religious or not, you think it's more. Here's part of what happens, and the reason I have the Wienermobile up here, I will now explain. Years ago, I was still a child. I think I was in middle school. And I turned on the TV station one day, and it's the Maury Povich Show. And the Maury Povich Show has the winner of the Oscar Mayer Wiener Song Contest. So they bring out the first kid, who's the second runner-up, to winning the Oscar Mayer Wiener Contest. And she sings like it's opera. She's like, my baloney has a first name. I didn't say I could sing like I'm an operatic. That's how she sang. And I'm like, man, I think that's a weird take on the Oscar Mayer Wiener song, but this kid is talented. Goes through the whole thing. They bring the second kid up there. And he's like a mix of Michael Jackson meets James Brown. Like he's dancing the whole time he's singing the song. He's running up and down the aisles. He's got the crowd going. I'm wondering, these two kids. And they bring her out. She's hid behind her mom's leg. They have to push her out of the stage. She's probably thinking the same thing. But they push her out on stage. They have to force her to sing the song. And then when she actually starts singing the song, she has her hands together and she starts rubbing them. And then how many people actually remember this song? For the younger people here, in TV commercials, they used to actually sing songs. They don't really do it anymore. But then she starts going, my baloney have a fourth name is O-S-C-A-R. My baloney have a second name is M-A-Y-O-R. And I'm thinking, that is totally the winner of the Oscar Mayer Wiener Song Contest, though she is not the most talented singer or performer. She's the authentic kid singing the song. If you're watching the commercial about buying some bologna, she's the one that's going to go make me buy some bologna. Everybody else wants to make me go see a Broadway show or watch Thriller again, right? When you tell a personal story, you don't realize it, but you come across different. You as an individual come across differently because you have a different connection with what you're talking about. I'll tell you a secret. I joined Toastmasters because I wanted to be a better trial lawyer, but I also had a difficult time with crying in court. I was working on cases where really bad things have happened to people. And I didn't understand what I was doing. It took me years to realize what was making me a better lawyer. But part of what was making me a better lawyer was spending so much time with my clients that I completely understood what their circumstances were. Some of you raised your hands and you said you've had to deal with a lawyer before. I want you to think back on how much time your lawyer actually spent with you, getting to know you. Do you think they spent enough time fully understanding where you were coming from? Most people tell me no. What I found is if you spend a lot of time with somebody who's been a victim of a violent crime, someone who's been raped, someone like a dad who has a daughter who's been raped, you spend enough time with them, you start to understand what they're feeling, it becomes overwhelming. And when you try to give a closing argument, it's almost impossible to not cry during that closing argument. And I had a hard time with that. So I thought, you know what, if I can learn how to speak really, really well and just be stiff and stoic, then I can get through this whole crying thing. Like no one will ever know that I'm feeling emotional. Now Jim Key saw my speech. How well did that work out for me, Jim?
That moment, not very well.
Yeah, not very well. Speaking emotionally is kind of my thing. And it took me a really long time to accept it. But for a while I thought, you know what? I just need to learn how to act so well that people can't tell. Didn't work for me. And when people try to act their way into an authentic story, that normally doesn't work either. Most people can't act well enough to make something real, but if you start off with a personal story, it's already real when you start talking. That's why you should focus on telling a personal story. Now, I want to bring you back to talking about my dad and the libraries, because the next question is, okay, I get that I'm supposed to tell a personal story, but how in the blank do I get from there to people actually wanting to listen to what it is I have to say? I told you The Hobbit did not go over well, right? Did not enjoy the book. And so I thought, since I didn't like The Hobbit, maybe my dad will let me go back to picking my own books when I write my book reports. Oh no, my dad was a military man. They don't give up so easily. So he hands me the second book, and I ask him, what is it with you and these titles? Pygmalion? Anybody here heard of that book? I was like, if this is another book about a garden gnome with big hairy feet, I don't know what I'm going to do. He says, it's not about that at all. I said, well, what's it about? He says, a duchess. I said, awesome, Dad. That's what every teenage boy wants to hear he's going to read with his father. A book about a duchess. He says, actually, it's about a flower girl who learns to speak English so well that she becomes a duchess. And I said, it's ironic that you're supposed to be teaching me about creative writing and persuasive writing, because this is not a good sales pitch. And so I did not expect to like Pygmalion any more than I liked The Hobbit. And I didn't. I loved it. It was my first guilty pleasure. And it was awkward because you can't talk to your teenage friends about reading Pygmalion and watching the movie, My Fair Lady. They don't really understand where you're coming from. But we watched that movie so many times, I can still remember the lyrics to most of the songs. Has anybody here seen the movie? It's a British film, just to warn those of you who don't know. One of my favorite songs was, how does it go? Oh, it's a crime for man to go philandering and fill his wife's poor heart with grief and doubt. Oh, it's a crime for man to go philandering, but with a little bit of luck, with a little bit of luck, you can see the bloodhound don't find out. Took me years to understand why my mom didn't like those songs as much as we did. But you know, it was weird because I told my dad, this is really awkward how much I like this movie. He said, a lot of boys watch movies with their dads. What's the problem? I said, the problem is that in this neighborhood, they don't feature Audrey Hepburn. My friends are watching Rambo with their dads. I was at the library last week wondering if you've seen Roman Holiday. And so we get through My Fair Lady, and it's the first time I really start learning some of the lessons that my dad is trying to communicate to me through the books that he and I are reading together. But when I look back as a communicator, part of what I realized was also happening was, when you're communicating with people, The first challenge you have is figuring out what your personal stories are to share. The next step, though, is figuring out how to make those stories come to life. One of the ways you help make your stories come to life is by using humor. Now, I want someone to raise your hand if you don't think you're funny. Like when people start talking in Toastmasters, this whole business about being funny, you find yourself thinking, you know what, I'm just not funny. I don't get it. Okay, good, I'm seeing some hands. Because I know there are more of you here who are not funny than the hands that I saw going up. So you're going to be penalized for having a friendly face and for smiling at the speaker while he's speaking. Do you mind if I ask what your name is? Pretty? Pretty, that's a very pretty name, and that's a cool pun. I can't resist it. It is a pretty name, I'm being serious. Okay, so you don't think you're funny? All right. Are you married? Are you in a relationship? Gosh, you're still single. Okay, we're not going to laugh about you being single. I'm going to use an easy example that you will be able to relate to shortly, trust me. I saw some more hands go up. Let me see them again. The hands of people who are not funny. Okay, ma'am, I see a ring on your finger. Are you married? Okay, what is your name? Dolores. How long have you been married?
More than 25 years.
More than 25 years. Is your husband here?
No, later on.
Okay, good. It's good that he's not here for what I'm about to ask you. Does your husband sometimes do stupid things?
Oh, yeah.
You hesitated? And I thought you were going to say, no, he doesn't do stupid things. You're like, oh, no. He does plenty of stupid things. Can you tell me the stupidest thing you can think of right now that he ever did?
Well, he's not.
He's not here. That's why I asked, is he here? He's not here. Are you struggling because too many things come to mind? You're going to say he's sorry? He doesn't say he's sorry. Okay, my wife would say the same thing if she was here. I think that's a common problem. Very common problem. Can you, and I know this is going to be a stretch. It's going to be a stretch. You're going to forgive me. You're going to want to throw things at me. I'm going to hop down. Can you imitate your husband's voice? Just a little bit? Like when you're in an argument, I'm going to hand you the lapel. Like when you're in an argument and he's not admitting he did something wrong, give the audience a sense of what his voice sounds like.
I like a divorce.
Oh, man. So you know what? When he does get here later, he's going to have a lot to answer for. But I'm going to use the steps so I don't trip and create a magic moment inadvertently. But Dolores, I want to ask you a question. When I started asking you about your husband, and you said that he doesn't apologize, did you notice what happened? People started laughing. And we didn't even tell a joke. We didn't tell a single joke. And people laughed. They laughed about the idea of your husband being stubborn. They laughed and imitated his voice. They laughed and you struggled to think through the dumbest thing he ever did. Anybody know why that happened? Yeah, you can relate to it. It's relatable, right? Who here has been in a relationship? And okay, I want you to keep your hands up. Put them down if in the course of that relationship, nothing frustrating ever happened. Yeah. Everybody's hand stayed up, right? If you don't think you're funny, let me relieve you. You can put your hands down now. Let me give you some relief. You don't have to be funny because life is already funny. You just have to learn to see it. And then once you learn to see it, you have to learn to communicate it. When I was giving my speech for the finals, I wanted to have these two characters interact. And part of what was going to happen was they were going to show up in the same place wearing the same thing. And I was having breakfast with my wife. And I looked at her and I said, forgive me, sweetheart, but women don't like that, right? Women don't like it when someone shows up wearing the exact same thing that you're wearing. And I thought she'd just say yes. She said something really funny. And she wasn't trying to tell a joke. She said, it's only a problem if they look better in it than you do. I was like, that's hilarious. That's really funny, right? And so, like I said, life is already funny. You don't have to be able to write jokes. So for all of you who said, you know what, I'm just not funny. I'm going to help you out with figuring out how to incorporate humor into what you're saying. And this is one of the most important lessons from this morning. We're trying to get back to people being entertained, right? When you start thinking through personal stories, the most important stories for you to communicate are stories about relationships. Think of someone you have a relationship with. A rely on movies all the time. I can give an entire speech, and I have, about how my wife helped me learn to be a better communicator by watching lots of movies. The first time my wife ever saw me speak, she'll say it was our first date. Do not listen. It was not our first date. A Toastmasters meeting was not our first date. It was like our second or third date. But, I'm a trial lawyer. I thought I was a hotshot speaker, and I asked her after the speech, what did you think? And she said one of the most insightful things anyone ever told me about my speaking. She said, if you had been one of my professors in college, you would have been my favorite professor. And I'm thinking, awesome, I'm totally going to get a third or fourth date. And then she said, but when you're talking to everyday people, I don't know if that's such a good thing. And she was right. And that is part of how I learned the importance of telling stories. When you tell stories, focus on telling stories about relationships. Now, I like movies, I like stories. You start thinking about relationships. We think of like love stories, right? I love a good love story. But here's what as you look at these pictures, here's what I want you to think about. When you think back to the movies that you like, that you really loved, or the stories that you really liked or loved, I challenge you to think about one that wasn't about one type of relationship or another. If they kissed during 48 hours, it would be the same basic story as My Fair Lady or Pretty Woman. The way the story gets told isn't that different. And I have like a series of these, because I grew up in the 80s. There were lots of buddy cop movies back in the 80s. E.T., not so different. It's a movie about a relationship. I know some of you are like, who is E.T.? You're making me feel old. Shame on you. Free Willy is a movie about a relationship. I hate to break it to you. That's all it's about. Thelma and Louise, same thing. The Blind Side. Anybody here read the book, The Blind Side? Okay, the relationship between the adopted family and Michael Orr is a small part of the book. It's about 15 to 20% of the book. The book is a history of the position that Michael Orr plays. But somebody realized, you know what, this story is so good, you can make a whole movie out of it. This is a movie about a relationship. I hate to break it to you. Star Wars, all about Luke and Yoda. It's about a relationship. It goes on and on and on. But the bottom line is, this is how you figure out stories that people are going to find moving. I think that the reason I started off talking in this segment about humor is because I don't think people actually understand the role that humor plays when you're telling stories. And I'm going to give you an example that's going to point it out. I think most people think that you put humor in your speeches. Why? Why do you put humor in your speeches? Entertaining, right? Any other reasons? You connect. You're supposed to. That's my reason. You're supposed to. Because people tell you to, right? I'm not going to give you a speech this morning on how to tell stories because too many people have already written books about that. But a new friend of mine, a guy named Dave Lieber. Does anybody here know Dave by chance? You know Dave Lieber? Dave writes for Dallas Morning News. He has the best diagram I've ever seen for how a story is supposed to go. It starts off with a straight line, and then you make a V, and you make a little curly Q at the end. I want everybody to draw that in the air so you're going to remember. It's going to be etched into your mind, okay? Straight line, then a V, then a curly Q at the end. You start off with an introduction. Something happens that makes the hero of the story dip down. The hero has to rise back up, and then you tie everything up at the end. People don't realize it, but when you are making people dip down, when you're talking about something that they're going to find meaningful, that's going to be moving for them, humor helps. It took me a long time to realize that because I've tried cases about a lot of really, really, really bad things. I've tried cases where people have been raped. I've seen cases where people had elderly parents. They starved them almost to death. I've seen people do that to children. I've seen a lot of really, really bad things. But when you're trying to make these things real for the jury in the courtroom, everybody always thinks, well, it's easy to prove, right? Yes, it's easy to prove what they did, but it's not easy to get the jury to relate to what happened to the people involved. That's the part that's hard. And you know what helps do that? It's not talking about the bad stuff because people already get that. Humor helps do that. And I'm going to give you an example from, actually first, before I get to this example, when you're practicing how to tell jokes, forgive me, this is an aside, totally forgot. Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, I watched all their movies growing up. That was back when they actually had PG movies, so adults and kids could watch movies together. That's not really true anymore. I used to watch these guys, and I used to love to imitate what they did. When you're trying to figure out how to tell stories, I told you life is funny. That's step number one. Step number two is you've got to figure out how to make life funny in the context of your speeches. What I recommend people do is pick a comedian that you like. There are lots of them. Some of them are over the top, some of them are very subtle, some are loud, some are quiet. Pick one you like and try to retell their jokes. What you're going to find is they behave in a much more silly fashion than you think. They do things that also help, like imitate voices, which is why I had you do that, Dolores. And you notice I do that when I'm telling stories. Just try to imitate what they do, and you'll find that you've got to be more exaggerated than you think to really deliver comedy well. You got to practice it. In front of the mirror doesn't really count, which is why I put the slide up here. Unless you're practicing in front of other people, you are not practicing improving your communication skills to the fullest degree. You can't learn how to be funny talking to yourself in the mirror. You have to talk to other people, because you've got to learn what makes people laugh when you say it. And it's probably not going to be the same as Richard Pryor, or you'd be as famous as Richard Pryor, right? But writing, reading books also helps. But, okay, I'm sorry, this was about making funny voices and movie speeches. I want to get to a case that I worked on when I actually realized how important of a role humor plays in making hardship real for people. This is a picture from a car crash that I worked on. The designated driver was driving this car. A young man who had 16 plus shots of Jack Daniels, in addition to a host of drinks he couldn't remember, was driving the car that hit her. And these are words from the detective who actually testified at the trial. He said, no crash is worse than this one. And this is Detective Doyle's words. He said, it's like hitting a wall at 90 miles per hour. Because she was going 45 miles per hour and he was going 45 miles per hour. He said, it's like hitting a wall at 90 miles per hour. That is what this crash did to her. This was a case I tried after I won the world championship, and I'd worked really hard through Toastmasters, and I understood the basics of how to communicate with people. One of the things that I learned is that giving speeches is not how you communicate most effectively with people. Giving speeches should help you learn how to communicate better one-on-one. You are no better in front of a bunch of people than you are talking to people one-on-one. If you're not good one-on-one, you're not good in front of a room full of people. You may think you are, but you're probably not as good as you could be. The reason I'm telling you this is because I learned the importance of talking to witnesses from the scene, one-on-one. One of the witnesses I remember most clearly from this case was a first responder. He was an EMT who showed up first at the scene. And rather than act like a know-it-all, which lawyers tend to do, by this time I knew, you know what, I need to let him educate me about what this was like when he got there. So I just started chit-chatting with him. We don't chit-chat anymore. I don't know why. With texting and Facebook, we don't chit-chat anymore. But I actually think it's one of the most important ways we communicate with each other. So when he stopped feeling like he was being interviewed, he just started chit-chatting with me. And one of the things he chit-chatted with me about was how they got her out of this seat, because she was behind the driver's wheel. And if you notice the steering wheel, I don't think I have a laser pointer, but if you notice the steering wheel is bent. You see how it's bent down? And I was like, you know, why is the steering wheel bent down? Is that from when she hit it? He's like, no, that's from when we used the hydraulic to get it off of her. So what do you mean you use a hydraulic to get it off of her? He's like, there was 6 inches of space between the steering wheel and the seat. I was like, what do you mean there's 6 inches of space? She was sitting in the seat. He's like, that was the problem. This is 6 inches of space. This is about 6 inches of space. So the jury heard all these things, right? But we still need a witness who can come explain what this means in context, right? So I started talking to her family members, and I found out she had a daughter who was not this old at the time of trial. Her daughter was in college. I think she was about 22 years old when I met her, 22, 23. And I talked to her, I realized, you know what? She's going to be a good person to put into perspective what her mom's life was like and how big this loss was to her family. So we put Priscilla up on the stand, and I said, Priscilla, I want you to tell the jury about your mom. And Priscilla looks at me, she says, my mom was the most annoying person you ever met in your life. I'd love to tell you I was laughing when she said that. But my immediate thought was, I looked at my trial partner, I was like, I thought we liked her. I thought she was going to be a good witness. It don't sound like she's going to be a very good witness. And so I'm trying to keep a straight face, composure. I said, Priscilla, I can't help but notice you just said your mom was annoying. Can you tell me what you mean when you say your mom was annoying? She said, I would love to. She said, I played volleyball in high school. All the other moms would show up and they would be quiet in the stands. Maybe they would cheer, they'd get excited. But my mom was the loudest one. And you could hear her screaming, yeah, Priscilla! Go, Priscilla! Throughout the entire game, my mom would scream. She said my prom night came and my mom was taking a bajillion pictures. She wouldn't leave the house. She took picture after picture after picture after picture. And I kept saying, Mom, we've got to go. And she wouldn't stop. She kept taking picture after picture after picture after picture. My graduation, she screamed even more than she screamed at all of my volleyball games put together, like, yeah, Priscilla! And she was so excited. And every time Priscilla told one of these stories, she would say, and I feel so bad because my brother will never get to experience that. She talked about the volleyball, then she said, my brother will never get to experience that. She told the funny stories about her prom, and she said, my brother will never get to experience that. She talked about graduation, she said, my brother will never get to experience that. And behind me, when she was doing this, I heard this. Now, the victim's ex-husband had been really angry throughout the entire trial. And I thought it was him breathing so heavy behind me. It's Priscilla's little brother. Because what Priscilla was saying was having a really big impact on him. And about halfway through Priscilla's words, he stood up and he said, look what you did! You took her away! And he started actually rushing toward the defendant. And I look back at that moment and I realized it wasn't just talking about sadness and the harshness of the crash that made him feel that way. It was talking about the happy moments that Priscilla remembered with her mom that did that. That is part of what humor does when you're talking to people. And I will be honest with you in saying that that is also true in your interpersonal relationships with people. People don't like feeling too sad. They like to have a little bit of humor, a little bit of laughter when you're talking to them. And the irony is that makes your communication more heartfelt, not less. My dad and I never finished reading the last book we read together. I still blame that on R.R. Martin. I don't think he's ever going to finish Game of Thrones. Got a few fans here I know of Game of Thrones. But I still can remember the last conversation I had with my dad. It was a conversation about which Lannister has the best character arc. Not which is your favorite, but which has the best character arc. And if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, you haven't read the books, don't worry. There's this famous swordsman in Game of Thrones. His name is Jaime Lannister. Like, fighting with a sword is his thing. He's the best in the world at it. And then somebody cuts his hand off. Didn't happen in the middle of a sword fight. They did it just to be mean and nasty. They cut his hand off. And if you're reading the books, that's who Jaime was. He was a swordsman. He gets his hand cut off. And now he's got to be something different. And when you're with somebody who's sick and you're in a hospital and you can tell that they're not doing very well, which is where I was with my dad at that time, you look back and you start thinking about your relationship. You start thinking about things you wish you'd said, things you wish you'd done. And that's what I kept thinking about with my dad when he was really sick. And I look back on that conversation and I realized he knew what his health condition was, because when he talked about Jaime Lannister, he told me that's how life works sometimes. Sometimes you think it's going one direction, it takes a different turn before you're ready for it to, and you have to find a way to live your life a little bit differently. You have to find a way to reinvent yourself and be something different. And I told the Friends of the Dallas Public Library that my father passed away. It'll be 2 years ago after this coming Thanksgiving. So if you've never had to eulogize a parent before, you may not realize how much of a challenge it is to find a way to summarize somebody's life in 5 to 10 minutes. And when I was writing my dad's eulogy, I started to think back on all those moments we had together. I knew I needed to take this time to remind him of how much I loved him, as demonstrated by how many times I watched that really bad version of the animated Hobbit movie, right? And I did. But then as I started thinking through the books that we read together, I realized I was having a hard time opening myself up to other experiences. So my dad picked a book about a guy named Bilbo Baggins who also had a hard time opening himself up to the world. And he taught me that, you know what? In the world of Lord of the Rings, everybody pretty much does what you'd expect. Elves act like elves, hobbits act like hobbits. But there's this one guy named Bilbo who's willing to be a little bit different in your life. I want to talk like the cool kids in my neighborhood, the cool people. So I used to act like them. And so we read a book about a flower girl who wanted to be a duchess. And somebody came along and talked to her, you want to talk to the flower girl? Even though our conversation was about Jamie Lannister. The last book my dad and I read together was actually Hamlet. And the BBC had this version of recordings of the Hamlet plays. We used to listen to them over and over again. And there was this one speech that he liked that we listened to over and over and over. It was a father giving advice to his son before he went away to college. The dad's name was Polonius, the son was Laertes. And he made me memorize the entire speech. And forgive me, we were watching the BBC recordings. He used to go, "Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar." BBC's a British publication, forgive the accent. "Say, those friends thou hast and their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged comrade." I'm seeing the red cards, you won't hear the entire speech. But it ended with something my dad used to say over and over again, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. True to yourself, you'll be true to the world." And I realized that my dad used to say, if you remember that speech in the Sermon on the Mount, you'll be okay in life. And so all those years, all those books that we read, he was teaching me what he wanted me to know and understand. The message I left the library with was, I don't know where else a young man growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, from the more challenging side of the tracks during the civil rights era, goes to get the idea that the world can be a different place apart from the public library. That was my message to them. I think they liked that a little bit more than a book report solely about why libraries matter. The message that I will leave you with this morning is that if you work hard on learning how to communicate your personal stories, what you will find is that you have value in them that not only will make you a better speaker, but it will allow you to share your experiences with other people in a way that allows them to lead better lives. It's been a pleasure speaking with you this morning, and I hope I get to touch base with some of you afterwards. Thank you. Yeah.